Let's go ahead and move on to the polling here that we have. It's been, a while now since the DNC wrapped, and we haven't had a lot of, especially high quality polling. We finally got some Fox News polls, and they are a high quality pollster out of several battleground states. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. These are really interesting, and I'll tell you why in just a second. So we've got Arizona, Harris 50, Trump 49, so 1 point difference there. Georgia, Harris 50, Trump 48. Nevada, Harris 50, Trump 48. And North Carolina is the one where Trump has a 1 point lead. And part of why this really grabbed a lot of attention, Saagar, is that these numbers are almost exactly the 2020 Biden-Trump actual election numbers. So a lot of 2020 vibes coming out of these polls. These were taken post-DNC and also just after the RFK dropout. So they should, in theory, although sometimes it takes time for news to leak out and people to really get a sort of wrap their heads around changing dynamics, et cetera, but they should reflect both a potential post-DNC bounce and a potential impact of RFK dropping out and endorsing Trump.
Yeah, I mean, that is really interesting battleground polling, and you can take it two different ways. You can say, wow, that's accurate, it's just like 2020, or you can point to the fact that it's so ambiguous and within the margin of error, it effectively just says what we'll always say on the show, it's like coin flip. If I look at the Nate Silver projection, his last projection that came out after RFK dropped out of the race is not in terms of the national polling, but he has in his forecast Harris at a 50.4% and Trump at 48.4%. I mean, that's as close as you could possibly get for the tie. I looked at Polymarket just this morning, the biggest betting market site right now. It's about Trump 50%, Kamala 49%, same thing. And so I think a lot of it will come down to both polling error, but a lot of it is also enthusiasm. And enthusiasm, though, is with the Democrats. So right now, a brand new Gallup polling out this morning, U.S. respondents' enthusiasm about voting compared to different presidential elections is at the highest level since 1996. Actually, Democratic excitement about voting is now surging to 2008 levels. Now, that said, one of the reasons why this is very different from 2008 is that Republicans were not enthusiastic to vote in 2008 while Democrats were, whereas this time around, Republicans are actually quite enthusiastic. So you actually have the battle of excitement, you could say. Previously, it was trending in the direction of a lower turnout election of 2020. I don't think that's going to be the case this time. It may even be higher or matching. And remember, 2020 was the highest level of voter participation that we've had in decades. So actually, quite a lot of this is actually going to come down to turning out your own side in the traditional coalition. If you're Harris, that's a good thing. If you're Trump, it's also a good thing. So it really puts you in a fighting chance on both sides of that. I mean, if I were Trump, this is why, with the podcast thing, it's easy to cringe and all of that. But it's one of those where, is it going to be is it going to be the main reason you win? Absolutely not. But in a game of inches, basically everything matters. And that's why, RFK is really what brought me back to totally Trump 50-50, because yes, he's still going to be on the ballot. But, if he's going to be stumping out there on the campaign trail for Trump, and same with Tulsi, listen, 1%, that's the difference. That's literally the margin in half of these states.
See, I actually don't think that it is a smart strategy leaning into the Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr. strategy.
Well, I was talking about podcasts more, not about them.
The podcasting is interesting. We'll see. Yeah, a lot of the podcasts he's going on, the people that are listening to them are already supporting him. But let me go ahead and cue up this next soundbite, because to be honest with you, this is more persuasive to me than, frankly, any of the polls that I've seen. Because polls, we've seen them be all over the place. And I don't know what to make of them at this point. Are they understating Trump? Are they overstating Trump? You could look at 2020 and say they're understating. You could look at 2022 and say they're overstating. Hard to say, right? But there's this data analytics firm. Now, it is a Democratic firm, so keep that in mind, but they're just looking at the numbers and crunching the numbers around voter registration and who is registering to vote. So this is not like, I've got to do a likely voter sample and can I get people on the phone, et cetera, et cetera. No, these are the hard factual numbers based on what different states are reporting in terms of who is registering to vote. Now, the firm is called TargetSmart. They are one of the only outlets that successfully predicted that 2022 was not going to be a red wave. And the reason they saw it coming is because they were looking at this voter registration data and saying, listen, this just doesn't fit with the metrics of a red wave type of election. So Tom Bonnier is the name of the guy you're about to listen to. He has new numbers reflecting, since Biden dropped out and Kamala got in, a massive surge in Democratic Party registration, but specifically among key demographic groups that you would expect to be enthusiastic about Kamala Harris and aligned with her and looking to vote for her in the fall. Let's take a listen to how he breaks this down.
We're tracking something really interesting going on right now. It's a surge in voter registration in key groups ahead of the November election. Among young black women, registration is up more than 175%. You heard that right, more than 175% in 13 states. That's compared to the same time in 2020. This, according to the data firm TargetSmart. Registration has also increased among young Latinas and black Americans. 175%, can that possibly be right? You must have triple-checked this, or many more times than that.
You're right to repeat the number because I've more than triple-checked it. It's incredibly unusual to see changes in voter registration that are anywhere close to this. I mean, to remind people, 175% is almost tripling of registration rates among this specific group. You just don't see that sort of thing happen in elections normally.
Let's go ahead and put the charts back up on the screen, the next element that we have here, just so people can be taking a look at this. This is a tweet from the same individual senior advisor to TargetSmart, Tom Bonnier. He says the Harris effect in the 13 states that have updated voter files since July 21st, that's when Biden dropped out. We are seeing incredible surges in voter registration relative to the same time period in 2024, driven by women voters of color and young voters. So if you look across this graph, all the way on the left, the smallest surge was among Republicans. The next smallest surge was among men. And the more you get to the right and the greater surge that you see, the more these groups typically vote for Democrats. And in fact, they not only look at states where you have to register as a Democrat or Republican, but they also model whether a particular voter is likely to be a Democrat or Republican, which sadly is actually quite easy to do. We're all very predictable, apparently. And 51% surge in increase in registration for Democrats post July 21 when Biden dropped down. And like I said, to me, this is perhaps the most persuasive data that I've seen, that it is possible the polls are actually undercounting Kamala Harris support because they are very unlikely to pick up new voters. And another point he made, which was interesting to me, new voters are actually more likely to turn out and vote. So first-time voters are more likely to turn out and vote than people who have been registered for a long time. So, Saagar, wondering what you made of this and how much significance. The other side of the equation would be, these groups were so depressed under Biden that there's this just pent up, they, rather than kind of gradually registering all the way along, like you would have expected, there was this pent up demand. And once Kamala comes in, then they would have been the ones that registered before under Biden, but they were so depressed by him. And so this doesn't reflect anything majorly different. But to me, these numbers are pretty extraordinary.
I know they are extraordinary. And also because they're real. And I mean, the cope, if you were a Trump person, would be, hey, listen, the electorate's actually changed. You can't necessarily bank on the fact that all young voters are going to go for Kamala or for black voters. I mean, I saw
young black women seems like pretty safe bet,
young black women, maybe, but young black men, I mean, listen, the last Fox News poll, that's one that we showed, actually had Trump tripling his black support from 7 to 19. I mean, that's pretty crazy.
But that's not by and large the group that's surging here.
No, again, I'm just saying, like, the cope would be that the shift in the electorate has dramatically changed. One case for why a lot of this, polling stuff is Ryan Gerdusky recently wrote a post about the liberal poll response bias. This is not an unskew in terms. No, it's not about Fox. It's about everything. I mean, and it was accurate in 2020. Is that a bunch of older white liberals were home and they were the only ones who were answering the phone, and that was part of the reason that they were off so much. So I mean, I see compelling reason as to why that wouldn't replicate itself. I don't see how necessarily they might have been able to change it. I'm not saying that it isn't tight or that Trump is winning or losing. It's that this voter registration data is very compelling. I do know that the Republicans have some of their own answer and have been doing this now for 2 years. There's groups like Charlie Kirk's and Scott Pressler who have have been out there for almost 2.5 years now, just registering the shit out of a lot of Republican voters. So there was basically there was a huge recognition post 2020. They're like, all right, we got destroyed on mail-in voting, and then they were like, well, we'll try and beat them and win a midterm, and then you get killed in the midterms. You're like, okay, well, we're gonna go to war with the army that we have under the current rules, and so they're trying to register as many seniors as possible. Have mail-in voting, targeting with mail, etc. I think that the case would be that the Republican turnout machine is not as ideologically against the current voting system, and so that's one of where the corrective could be as well. So anyway, I mean, look, in general, voter participation is good. So I'm happy. Yeah,
sure.
I want people to do more registered vote.
So to be honest with you, I was thinking about this. If I put the polls aside, right, because like I said before, which direction are they off? At this point, no one can say, right? Yeah. No one knows. If I put the polls aside and I look at the fundamentals, the race actually looks pretty simple. Kamala Harris is more popular than Donald Trump. Tim Walz is more popular than J.D. Vance. The issue set she's running on, and we're going to talk about more about this with the Trump economic bloc. The issue set she's running on is more popular, including her economic plans and leaning into abortion. He's old, she's young. And the big advantage that he's always had on the economy, which he maintained against Joe Biden, and Joe Biden was, able to overcome, that advantage is basically gone. She's neutralized it. So the more I look at the fundamentals, the more I feel like the only reason that I'm, so reluctant to be like, it looks like she's in the lead and she's, has the edge in terms of winning is just because it's Donald Trump and who the hell knows what's going to happen. But to be honest with you, we may be overcomplicating this because when you look at all those factors lined up, she, when you test, all the different presidential characteristics that people want to see in a leader, she wins on almost all of them. The one where he usually gets her is strong leader. But on all of the other ones, she outperforms him. So this is someone who people like more, they like her policies more, she's more youthful, she's captured that we want change spirit. Even as she is in some ways an emblem of the status quo, she's captured that change spirit. And so looking at those voter registration numbers, it gave me more of a sense that those fundamentals actually do reflect reality.
You could be right. I mean, the counter would be, the immigration situation is crazy. We're going to talk about the polling later with Trump. That has been a massive change. The other thing is we live in a way more divided country than ever before, where a lot of those fundamentals don't actually matter all that much sometimes for partisan people whenever they go to vote. And, look at the way that people even perceive the economy depending on who the president is in power. The economy situation over the last 3 years still was not good. So she may be running on something, but she's got the Biden baggage. And if Trump could successfully tie her, then you don't even need to win the popular vote. You only need to win by one vote in all of these 3 states. So that's one where I still see, a major electoral college advantage that Donald Trump has. Pennsylvania in particular, the Senate races are actually narrowing in some respects lately, depending on where you look at. And so I see 3 scenarios. I see Dem blowout. I see extremely tight and narrow where whoever wins only wins by 2 to 5 electoral votes. But I could also see a major Republican victory as well, where there was a significant underestimating of a lot of this discontent a la 2016. Just because polling, as we know, doesn't necessarily capture a lot of stuff. And Trump is such a unique and a dynamic figure that he is so able to always defy expectations at the ballot box. I mean, again, though, we don't have a lot of data. That's part of the issue with elections. It only happens every 4 years. So you can conjure a narrative like I just did out of 2 freaking elections. It's just not a lot, for us to make any sense of.
The one thing though that the Trump people, and you always point this out, in 2020 would point to when they come on Rising,
the economy.
Was the economy.
Yeah.
They'd be like, he still vastly outperforms Joe Biden on the economy. And we were sort of like, whatever.
Maybe.
Because the polls were so clear at that. I mean, Biden was winning by 9 points, 10 points, whatever. COVID was a catastrophe. We're like, it's over for your candidate. I'm sorry. But actually, they were right. I mean, they still lost.
Yeah.
But the economic numbers were one of the things that kept him in the game. So when I see, and actually we can
put, what is this,
A9? The last element in this block, I'd throw this up on the screen. When I see, and this isn't the only poll that reflects this, when I see her pulling close or even or on that question of who would be better on getting prices down, she pulls a little bit ahead. When I see that, I feel like that is maybe as consequential a poll number as I have seen, because that was the one thing that they were like, no, but people care about the economy. It's always the number one issue, and they still like Trump on the economy. That she has managed to neutralize his advantage on what has always been his strongest issue, I think is quite remarkable. And with regard to immigration, no doubt that's her weakest issue. They know that's her weakest issue. I think they're handling it very poorly. We'll talk more about that in a later block. However, I just don't see evidence that this is a big issue for swing voters. I think abortion is a much larger, more consequential issue in terms of driving enthusiasm and in terms of swing voters. Especially given the fact that the immigration, the border numbers are down at this point. You don't have, there was a peak of concern previously when there were all these buses going to blue cities, and there was a real, concern and frenzy about that, and understandably so. I think that has peaked, and again, the most hawkish immigration voters are already voting for Donald Trump. So yes, it's her weakest issue. Yes, it's a problem for her. I just don't see it being as consequential as Republicans hope it will be.
It's like I said, if it's an abortion election, the Democrats are going to win. There's just no question in my mind. Considering every state data that we now have at this point, the supermajority, if it's an immigration election, I think Trump is going to win. If it's an economy election, it's very down the middle, and I could see it. Look, there's no question that Kamala's a way better candidate than Biden, and that's why the GOP should be more afraid. They shouldn't be doing, it's like vice versa. They should just not talk about abortion, period. It should be as much as they possibly could. They'd be like, what do you mean? Oh, did you say immigration? Was that what you meant? And then vice versa. If I were the Democrats, I wouldn't even try to compete. Unless you're a Ruben Gallego, because that guy is, what a unique race. We should talk about it at some point. The only candidate where, what was it, the Arizona Police Association is endorsing Trump and Ruben Gallego over Kerry Lake. And he put out an ad in Spanish talking about hiring more border agents. I mean, I couldn't love that more from a realignment perspective, but it does show you why he's up.
That's Arizona politics.
That's why he's up 11 points. Up 11 points in the state of Arizona, while Trump is basically tied with Kamala Harris. I mean, that's shocking, just to behold some of what that looks like. And there's a case that overperformance by Gallego would actually help Kamala Harris.
Absolutely.
So this is where a strong or a weak Senate candidate can really it can make the deciding factor, just because split ticket voting in a presidential year, not saying it can't happen, but it's relatively rare. So listen, I wouldn't deny that there are some fundamentals on the Democratic side. I just am always very, very cautious. I mean, we lived through 2016, we lived through 2020, and getting the pulse and the mood of the country, foreseeing those Latino shifts in South Texas and all of that, or foreseeing the white liberal wave in 2020-22 were so unexpected, with so tiny little bits of data to be able to point to. It's more about, like, let's just see, I guess, where the chips fall. That's really all we can do.
That's all we can do.
Yeah. Difficult, right? Difficult for people like us, especially. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.